Alright, so it is time for the albums of the year. Hello, you stinky little ghouls and gremlins. It's time to wrap up the year with some of my favorite records of 2024. This is a pretty wide array of records from a lot of different spaces in the metal community, and also, I feel like it goes without saying they all get my stamp of approval in terms of check out any of these. No matter where they place on the list, I enjoyed them a lot, and I feel like there's going to be something here for everyone, hopefully. And maybe I can turn you guys on to some music that slipped through the cracks for you, but also, I want to know what your guys' lists are. This is my favorite time of the year because I always enjoy getting recommendations from you guys and seeing the records that meant the most to you, either just musically or on a personal level you resonated with, you related to it, whatever it may be, whatever your reason is, what are your favorite records of the year? And I also may end up doing a follow-up video to this of like my favorite non-metal records of the year because I listen to a lot of non-metal as well, but this is a metal list. And I went ahead and repositioned myself so I can put the artworks around here so you can look at the pretty art. But yeah, let me know if you end up checking out any of these records or if maybe we share some. But without further ado, here we go. My top 15 favorite albums of 2024. Number 15 is going to go to Keys to the Astral Gates and Mystic Doors with their record Keys to the Astral Gates and Mystic Doors 2. So I know there was a part 1 and a part 2 and they were both demos, and there's also a compilation which I believe includes both, but it's specifically the second one that I fell in love with from this project. They're an American black metal duo, if I remember correctly, and this isn't going to be for everyone, but it is by far my favorite, like, raw, lo-fi, primitive black metal of the year. It gets in and out before it becomes overly cumbersome, and there's just something about the general vibe of it, the black evil of it, the incantation-like feel of all of the evil in this record that kind of draws me to it. I feel like a lot of black metal records try to sort of have that style, but it's obvious while they are mimicking sort of the Scandinavian lo-fi type of black metal music, it has that American touch, and even though it is very rawly produced, like it is quite subterranean, honestly, it is pretty intelligent, it is pretty comprehensive. And yeah, when I was making this list, I was just like, what are the records I just went back to for whatever reason a lot, and this is a record I consistently went back to quite a bit. Next up is going to be Khors with Letters to the Future Self. So this is a project out of Ukraine, and it has ties to both Hate Forest and Nocturnal Mortem, if you're familiar with those names, which Hate Forest are very infamous in the black metal community. And I feel like the vocals are the selling point. The whole thing here is very pretty and very beautiful, but in kind of like the heavy way and the over-the-top way, but it is pretty damn controlled and restrained, and the vocals are why I keep coming back to this record. They're exasperated, they are overzealous, they are in your face, they're very blunt, but not in a way that feels too corny. They just more so feel very urgent and on the edge. Like, it has this tortured aesthetic to it that I appreciate a lot, and that's something that I like in a lot of black metal, and I know it's not for everyone, but whenever black metal already feels very sorrowful in one way or another, and it's backed up with a vocal style that might not be the most widely appealing to every black metal fan, but feels like it has its own unique flair and spin to it, that's something I always love to hear, and this is probably the black metal record that impacted me the most in terms of sheer vocal dynamics. The rest of the instrumentation here is pretty much what you would expect from that side of European black metal. It's nothing like too crazy. It blends in a lot with like some of the Balkan regions and Russian and Ukrainian black metal and that sort of stuff. So it's not crazy in that regard, but it is still performed very well. It's just the vocals take the star here. Next up, I'm gonna go with Fractal Gates with One with Dawn. This is a fantastic progressive death metal record with quite a bit of sci-fi influence. Their whole aesthetic and what they write their music about is extraterrestrial life and the galaxy and space and sci-fi stuff. So if you are a fan of sort of that spacey progressive death metal style that bands like Rings of Saturn perform, obviously not to the same degree in terms of speed, it airs more on the side of progressive metal, and it has some of the most pretty and just overall beautiful soundscapes that I've heard this entire year. And even if it may be a little long for some people, and it does have a lot of songs. If I remember right, this thing has 16 tracks on it. I've always felt that with any sort of progressive metal offshoot, if you can justify your length by not just padding out for time and filler, which I do think you can tell when a band wants to do that, and it is just good music, I will obviously be a lot more invested. And this by far is one of my favorite prog records of the year, if not my favorite. Muuntautuja, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I don't think I am, by the Finnish band Ranzi Pazuzu. Pazuzu. They scratch an itch that no other band scratches for me, and I think as an itch that doesn't get scratched by many bands, period, if any, and that is a universal truth. If you stumble across a Ranzi Pazuzu, they are so damn unique. They're like a psychedelic black metal project, and this record is eerie. It's like every time they release a new album, they find a new way to sound cavernous, to sound endless, but also suffocating in the way that they come across. There is something so creepy about it, and the only thing I can equate it to is the same way when I listen to like The Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails, or like some really great atmospheric industrial projects. There's a decent amount of dark ambient influence across this thing, and it is absolutely dripping with atmosphere from pretty much start to finish. And it's really crazy to me because even though the selling point of Ranzi Pazuzu has always been their psychedelic influence and how that is very unique for black metal and not many other bands are able to do it at their level, the black metal moments across this thing are harrowing. They're massive, they're huge. The production on it backs it up tenfold. But yeah, you can never go wrong with an Ranzi Pazuzu record, and they have shown themselves to just have the chops to be incredibly consistent. And this record is absolutely no different. Next up, I'm going with The Last of Lucy with Godform. This was one of my favorite just complete accidental discoveries that I made this year. I follow like the channel and label and stuff Transcending Obscurity, and if you're a fan of like tech death and brutal bands, please God, I implore you to check out Transcending Obscurity because I have found so many fantastic records, even if it's only for like a week or so of listening. But this record has stuck with me. It is that sort of Rings of Saturn, Archspire sort of tech death release, extremely sanitized production, but not in a way that necessarily makes it feel too overly engineered. It smartly doesn't stick around too terribly long because it gets everything that it wants to say out in one fell swoop, and I absolutely love the production on this thing. I don't think it's necessarily going to be for everyone, but if you want a tech death release a la Archspire and Rings of Saturn, that sort of is just that constant feeling of just 5,000 BPM and guitars flying in every direction and an octopus on the drums, layered brutal vocals that create this cacophony of sounds that are just piercing your ears. Check out this record. Next up, my favorite atmospheric sort of record of the year, Bong Ripper with Empty. Now, ever since I first heard Terminal, which was the record that got me into Bong Ripper, I have just loved their take on doom metal and sludge metal. And these are genres that rarely I hear really good records from, because in a similar fashion to how very fast bands feel like just playing fast makes you automatically good, a lot of slower genres like doom metal, funeral doom metal, sludge metal, stoner bands either wear their influences so hard on their sleeve that nothing sets them apart from the other pack of 1,000 bands doing exactly what they're doing, but you also have bands that feel like just being as slow and murky as possible will automatically make you a good band in the specific movement we're talking about. But Bong Ripper understands that padding out the time and atmosphere of their extremely long compositions can be counterbalanced by really catchy riffs, really murky riffs, great guitar tones, and just an overall atmosphere that creates an ambiance that you can sink into. Now, with that being said, you are still going to have to like very slow compositions to enjoy Bong Ripper. This is an extremely long record. It is over an hour's worth of material, and it is only 4 tracks long. And the album cover and name just back it up. It is like this cavern. It does feel very dark. It does feel very low and murky, like you're in a damn swamp. You know, the swamp from Lord of the Rings? That's where we are with this thing. And as someone who adores atmosphere and music and loves to see that sort of stuff come through in compositions, this really did sell me heavily. And it reminded me how consistent Bong Ripper are, and how a lot of people that don't typically like these genres kind of sleep on them because they think they're going to be like them. Please check out Bong Ripper. I am the #1 stan and advocate for the French band Benighted, and that's why this list is going to include Benighted's Ekbom. I wish I had a lot to punctuate this with, but Benighted have been one of my favorite bands for a very long time, and this may just be a personal pick, but they are so consistent at what they do. Asylum Cave is like a top 10 or 15 record of all time for me, and if you're a fan of like the cattle decap breed of death grind, this is a great example of it. And yeah, I mean, Julian just continues to improve himself as a vocalist and showcase his versatility and how he just kicks ass and just takes everyone's name. I think Benighted are heavily slept on in the death grind scene, and this record also has a pretty cool concept behind it. Benighted always try to do something brutal with their stylistic choices when it comes to the thematics, and this is about a condition called like ekbom syndrome, which translates to like a longer name, but it's basically people who delusionally think that their body is full of insects and parasites, which, yeah, I mean, what more do you need to say besides that? If you just want a no-frills type of release that takes no prisoners and is exactly what you would want from a death metal release in the modern era, check it out. It is extremely well balanced in my opinion. Next up is going to be Knocked Loose with You Won't Go Before You're Supposed to. Son of God! Sorry, just had to let some of that out. Knocked Loose is such a meme at this point because of like Brian Garris as a vocalist, but I know they have been in talks recently because of the Jimmy Kimmel performance, and just in general, Knocked Loose have been a pretty hot button topic for a lot of metalheads and punk fans for quite some time now. But if you look past all of the semantics of it, Knocked Loose made one of the best albums of the year, and it is undeniable. I don't want to rant and ramble on it too much because I feel like everyone is sick of hearing about this record, but I've always said that sometimes things get overhyped, and then sometimes things get overhyped because they are very good. An example of this from like the anime standpoint is Attack on Titan blowing up back in the day. You couldn't escape that anime, but it's because it was fantastic. That's how I feel about this Knocked Loose record. Some of the craziest vocal acrobatics and triple layered vocalists just dueling each other. Some of the heaviest breakdowns, obviously. Really insightful, surprisingly insightful lyrics, which you wouldn't necessarily anticipate from Knocked Loose. And I think that this record being pretty short plays to its benefit very much so. Everyone knows it's a great record. It's not my favorite record of the year, but it is very much up there. And anytime I am just pissed, I will turn on Knocked Loose. And I feel like they are one of the best things to happen to modern punk and modern metal. That's why I made an entire video about the importance of Knocked Loose, and I'd love to deep dive them even more, because their rise to fame is truly a case study, and it's honestly what I'm glad we're observing. So if for whatever reason you've been living under a fucking rock, please check out this Knocked Loose record before the year is over. Do yourself the favor, do yourself the service. Next up, I'm going with Darkthrone's record, It Beckons Us All. Now, I know that not everyone likes the modern era of Darkthrone. Nocturno and Fenris have been dabbling in old school vintage styles for quite some time now, and they are not just a black metal band anymore. Borderline, they're not really a black metal band a lot of times, I would say, because ever since the 2000s, they've been dabbling more in speed metal and classic heavy metal, taking rock and roll influence, and I personally love it. I feel like this was an underwhelming release for a lot of people, but it's everything that I want to hear from a modern Darkthrone release if this is the path they're going down. It is equal parts catchy, it is vintage without feeling too fake or disingenuine, and I think that's where a lot of bands that try to emulate a past style fall flat. There's not really that many bands that are successfully feeling old school without feeling like they're injecting something from the modern era. I think this is also the modern Darkthrone record that feels the more rock and roll inspired. It is very groovy, and I actually really enjoy that. I think it's just, for me, I love hearing a band that is so raw and so archaic, performing a style that is very outside of their wheelhouse, but consistently finding a way to do it better and better with each release, in my opinion. I really enjoy the Darkthrone release, and it gets caught in my head a lot. It is incredibly catchy, in my opinion. Next up is going to be the black metal project Eumo. It is self-titled, and as of now is the only record from this project. Now, do you guys like anonymity? Do you like mysteriousness? Well, this might be the project for you. I stumbled on this out of completely left field, had no idea what this was, found it through Bandcamp months and months ago and talked about it, and it has stuck out as one of the most cool and mysterious records of the year for me. So this is a Japanese black metal project, and anyone that is familiar with like Japanese black metal, and specifically I will say a lot of East Asian black metal styles, they feel a lot more wispy and urgent. They feel like they're just in your face and haunting and eerie and ominous in a way that I don't always hear from a lot of other contemporary projects from around the world, and wispy is a great way to describe this. These vocals feel like some ethereal ghost, this specter just screaming out from the void. It is catastrophically haunting and has one of the best productions of any black metal I've heard this year, but it is still kind of clinging to the hallmarks that makes black metal interesting to begin with. If you are interested in just no frills, no bullshit type of black metal, but you want something into the formula that feels a little hard to identify and a little bit different and off the beaten path, alongside a project that no one really knows that much about, check out this record. We're in the big leagues now, bucko. Now we are on to In Vain's record, Solemn. This is a record that if you love it, you are going to be so happy to know that it is well over an hour's worth of material, and if it's not your cup of tea, maybe you won't. I can easily say this year it is the perfect blend of brutal and heavy. If that is something that you enjoy, this is a record you have to check out. It's a gorgeous mixture of clean and harsh with a wonderful production to back it all up. They counterbalance all of this heavy, progressive, and sort of melodic death metal music with clean vocals, which I thought was really cool. I love the incorporations of them. They feel very tasteful and they hit sort of peak dynamics of the songs. And on the more brutal and harsh sections, there's fantastic layering of the vocals, and the thing is just full to the brim with downright catchy riffs from pretty much start to finish. Very, very earwormy. It's the perfect blend of brutal and pretty, and while it is very long, for someone like me that likes very cinematic and epic and theatrical records that are able to justify its length, I think that In Vain are very much capable of doing that here. Next up, Zombie Shark with Die Laughing. Die Laughing is what I would call a musical absurdist wet dream, and I think that's how I would describe Zombie Shark as a whole. Those of you that have followed the channel for many, many, many years at this point will know that the year that I Will Destroy You, Myself, and Everything I Ever Loved, I believe it's called, that was my album of the year it came out by Zombie Shark, and I've had the privilege of getting to talk to Corey, like the mastermind of this project, and this is one of those projects that I'm pretty good at figuring out like the labels of things, for lack of better terms, or being able to help people understand like maybe what something is or what a specific genre is. I take a lot of pride in that and I enjoy doing it. Zombie Shark, I don't really know what to call. At face value, it's a cybergrind project. Yeah, it is. It is very relentless, but all of the different electronic music and heavy influences that come together to create this bastardized amalgamation of a genre is crazy to me, and the fact that it's also compact and concise is even more impressive to me. Zombie Shark scratches this manic, erratic musical itch that I feel like a lot of bands attempt to do, and it's the same way I feel when I listen to a really great hyperpop release or something from like Femtonal, for example, or a lot of breakcore artists, or let's say like Igor. It's impossible to pin down, and every time you feel like the album has reached as heavy or crazy or weird or absurd or abstract as it's going to get, it just goes harder and fucking harder. It truly does feel like the musical equivalent of like a manic episode, and Luxosceles on the Isosceles is like a top 5 song of the year for me. If you want something that is gonna sound like nothing else you're gonna hear this year, if you want to listen to one album here that is just not like anything, check out this Zombie Shark release. The only reason it's not higher is I feel like as someone who is a fan of Zombie Shark, I can look at his past material and say that he is doing a lot of the same thing, but to someone hearing it for the first time, it'll probably blow your fucking mind. And we're into the bronze, silver, and gold of the year, starting with number 3, Boundaries, Death is Little More. So this is just pissed off New England metalcore, and I honestly was thinking about like how I compare this to Knocked Loose, because I feel like a lot of people would probably put Knocked Loose record ahead of it, but my god, this record honestly got me through some shit this year. This is probably one of the records, the only records on the list that I can safely say I would go to when I was just not feeling the greatest. It's a great balance of modern metalcore and older metalcore. There are some tracks here that feel very As I Lay Dying inspired, or like that sort of old school style. It's just incredibly well balanced. Like Petals from a Stem has one of my favorite breakdowns of the year and can rival anything that is on that Knocked Loose record. Forced to Remember has sort of, like I said, that As I Lay Dying old school riff, and Darkness Shared has incredible clean vocals, and that's something that I like a lot about metalcore, is when when clean vocals are not just cheesy and corny and are actually good. This whole record is mixed very claustrophobically and very densely. It feels impenetrable and it chokes you in the atmosphere, and while it is very heavy and pissed off most of the time, it kind of has that New England metalcore style at some point that you would get from like I would say like Converge, but it's also like Dillinger minus the mathcore. And I know I'm making a lot of comparisons, but these are supposed to be compliments. I really do feel like this record and just Boundaries as a whole identify what makes metalcore so special as a genre and incorporates all of these great ideas into one record that is the most well-balanced metalcore record of the year in my opinion. I've went back to this a ton. It is one of my most listened to records of the year. It is infinitely replayable. It is catchy when it needs to be, but for the most part, it is enraged. It is impossible to keep down. It is an uncaged beast, and that's why I love it. At number 2, we got Unborn Generation with And All We Forget. If there's a record that you have just not heard anything about this year and you want to take one from this list to listen to immediately, please check out this. Easily grind album of the year, punk adjacent record of the year, crust and D-beat release of the year. These are all genres that I feel like either really hit the mark or really don't, and my god is this thing punishment, auditory punishment. It is relentless. If you want something clean, if you want something pretty, you aren't going to get it here. This is piss baby crust and D-beat music made to the tens. It almost gets to the point of being uncomfortable to listen to at points, and I mean that with the utmost respect. This thing just pounds you down in the same way that like doom metal releases like Primitive Man's Caustic Man are able to grind you into smithereens. This one does it with just heaviness. If you want a good approximation of like modern D-beat and crust music, please listen to this thing. They've been kicking it for quite some time now. They just don't necessarily get that much acclaim or talked about that much, and I'm hoping maybe I can change that a little bit and get some more people onto them with this record, because my lord, I love this thing to fucking death. It'll beat you to the ground and make you thank them for it. It smells like tear gas. And finally, my album of the year, and this might actually surprise some of you guys, I'm going with See You Space Cowboy's record, Coup de Grace. I could talk about See You Space Cowboy for a long time. I am probably one of the most, if not the most well-versed people in terms of creators when it comes to See You Space Cowboy. I've spent hours upon hours listening to interviews, researching this band, deep diving this band, watching live performances of this band, very familiar with their entire discography, and I am incredibly impressed with this record because it is everything that I love to see in music. It is just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. This is a dancey, dance indie-inspired post-hardcore record with emo and screamo influences, with metalcore breakdowns. It is all over the place. They continue to challenge themselves as vocalists and having multiple vocalists on different tracks. Connie just hones her skills so much, and hearing the influences of this record like neo-noir stuff and jazz stuff and having these jazz interludes and these spoken word moments, it's the culmination of everything See You Space Cowboy has built up to, because in the past, they've never stuck to one thing, and every single record that they've done has been different than the one before it. Correlations was very metalcore inspired, Songs for the Firing Squad was very Locust and Daughters-ish, and that sort of absurd grindcore style of the 2000s, and The Romance of Affliction was obviously a very personal record, but Coup de Grace just feels very fun. And where are you gonna find a record that is inspired by Drop Dead Gorgeous, The Blood Brothers, Interpol, Block Party, Tokyo Police Club, Incubus, as well as fucking Panic at the Disco? It's dancey, it's fun, it's so easy to get behind, it is a front to backer. In my opinion, it has no songs that I just skip. It has so many quotable moments, so many peak vocal dynamics, amazing choruses that just get stuck in my ears. The riffs are very heavy, but they also are twinkly and dancey, and you could two-step to them amazingly. This collection of songs I've went back to the most this year. I have sworn by this record. I swear by See You Space Cowboy. I will always try to get more people onto them. I think that everything about this record, conceptually, lyrically, vocally, sound-wise, production-wise, influence-wise, is daring, is challenging, is incredible, and I am more than happy to give it my album of the year, because it has only grown on me more and more and more as the year has progressed, and I've really learned what led to this record being made. But that's all for me. What are your guys' opinions of the best albums of the year? And my opinion, of course, my opinion's not the gospel. Let me know down in the comment section below your list of your favorite albums, metal or otherwise, or both. I don't care. I'd love to see them both down in the comment section below. I can't wait to hear it. Agree or disagree, there is no wrong answer. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is. My name is Jay Morris, and I'm signing off saying farewell.